He is a political analyst and ex-U.S. Marine who renounced U.S. citizenship. The important thing for the regime in North Korea is survival. Why would they risk everything to bait the Americans and bait the South Koreans? Because I'm not a military man here, but if the North Koreans were to start any kind of military offensive against one of its neighbors, that country would probably be incinerated in a matter of hours. They're not going there, but if you read Western media, it looks like we're dealing with a lunatic state, just as James pointed out. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I really believe this is more smoke and mirrors than anything else, and I think the timing couldn't be more obvious. This recent false flag event in Syria and Trump's absolute U-turn and ridiculousness, insulting the American people and the world with his beautiful babies and concern for the Syrians, is nothing more than a complete, total continuity with the policy of the United States over the last few decades, and that would be to completely destroy the Middle East. Now, when Trump did this, so many of his constituents, those who supported him and got him into office, were outraged. They voted for him in direct opposition to Hillary Clinton because they knew that World War III was a virtual absolute with her, that psychopath extraordinaire criminal with a husband who likes to fly off with Jeffrey Epstein on the Lolita Express to go do God knows what while he dismisses his Secret Service heading to the U.S. Virgin Islands. So this thing that's happening with North Korea, I believe, is nothing more than smoke and mirrors to divert from the real policies which are going to be continued because Donald Trump is owned by the very same interests that own the U.S. Congress, and the policies are to continue to destroy the Middle East. Right. I do believe that they're going to head into Syria and go ahead and bring in U.S. troops, and a lot of those U.S. troops who saw what happened with Syria in the last couple of weeks came out and made some amazing YouTube videos and said, what the hell are you doing, Donald Trump? So for me, and aside from that, the United States never fights anybody who can fight back. True. We're cowards. We don't pick on people who can fight back.
That's the logic here. The more you threaten this country, the more it's going to be defensive. I mean, that's human nature. That's on a human-to-human level, but not just country to country on a global stage. I mean, if I were South Korea, I would make sure I would have as many defensive capabilities as I could to deter aggression. Go ahead.
Well, if Iraq taught the world anything, it is, and Libya for that matter, giving up its nuclear program, the world has been taught, if you want to avoid the empire's wrath, make sure you arm yourself to the teeth, because disarming yourself is not going to serve any protection at all. Let's also get in, here's where North Korea and Syria and the Middle East, all of it ties in. There is a very big misunderstanding amongst the people of the world who don't have psychopathic, sociopathic qualities. See, for those of us who have any level of humanity, we don't want war. But there's a big problem. Those who are in charge actually have a major incentive to have war. Now, the bankers who run the world, literally by having an infinite supply of money, while us dupes allow ourselves to pay interest, interest when we could print that money ourselves, and let's get to JFK, who was going to end that by issuing United States notes as opposed to Federal Reserve notes, which of course is a private bank.
Ken, let me jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and let me go back to Ken here. Two things about crosstalk that people complain about. I have to go to a hard break in the middle, and it's too short. So I cut you off in the first half. Please continue, my friend.
You know, what I'm going to say now, I want to make clear, is motivated by a deep love of this beautiful planet and all humanity. And while many of my brothers and sisters in the human family are acting in a completely unacceptable way, what I'm saying is based on love. There is no grudge. I simply want what's best so that we can hand this world over in a better state than we have it now. We are continuing to flirt with a third world war. It seemed that people in World War II realized, especially with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that we could not do this a third time. But apparently we've been cast under another spell and seem to forget that we do have the capacity to destroy this planet. Now, those of us who have any kind of sanity and humanity realize the dangers of this, but those who are running the world through the control of finance have a major incentive to incite war, because more important than the money that they control is the most important parameter of a tyrannical system, a tiny minority ruling over the masses. And that principle is you will never be able to rule people if you cannot divide them. So you must divide them. What divides people more than anything else? War, mass murder, horrendous crimes, torture, things like that are good in the view of a banker. So the bankers have a major incentive just as a carte blanche reality of where they are. But right now they have an extra added incentive, and that incentive is that the consciousness of humanity is rising. And many of the key principles of the tyrannical system we're dealing with are being exposed. And there's an elephant in the room that I'm going to get into after the other guests talk, because it's an important elephant that we seem to be ignoring. But the major point that I want to make right now is that those who are in charge of this world have a major incentive to instigate a third world war. And this is where I would disagree with my brother Mohammed there in Russia if you think that logic and rational behavior and sense is the guide, because attacking North Korea would be catastrophic, of course. And I used to live in Hawaii. Hawaii may well be incinerated, literally. Hawaii would be a primary target, and I love my Hawaiian brothers and sisters, and I'll be damned if I'm going to sit by and say nothing that is relevant to that situation because I'm afraid of the consequences. So I'm going to get back to the elephant in the room after the other guests have a chance to talk. But make no mistake, those who are running this world right now have a major incentive for a third world war.
Well, you know,
place that we can go to, another place we can go to is Iran, which I'm heading back to again. There's 100,000 victims in Iran from the chemical weapons that Saddam Hussein used with the aid of the CIA. This is a matter of public record. Let us remember how he was our favorite little attack dog in the Middle East, and that we had to attack Iran for having the audacity of getting rid of our puppet, the Shah. And the Iranians, all too ironically, while being told, the whole West being told that these are the evil people who want to exterminate the Jews and all this kind of nonsense, the Iranians had an amazing debate within their nation back in the 80s when they were being attacked by weapons of mass destruction from Saddam Hussein and chemical weapons. And there was a debate about whether they should even attack Basra and Baghdad with weapons of mass destruction. And you know what their answer was? No, we can't, because we're a God-fearing nation and it would be immoral and God would not approve. So this is yet another example, 100,000 victims of chemical weapons in Iran. So yeah, America's moral authority hasn't existed for decades. And I have been shocked that even back in 2003 that people were talking about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Excuse me, the United States is the biggest producer, distributor, and user of weapons of mass destruction, and it's going to be the moral authority to talk about who can and can't have them? It was absurd then. It's even more absurd now.
In reality, though, and I know many people would not like this when I say it, but in reality, Obama is more evil than the Korean regime, because he's killed many more people through drone strikes, through supporting Saudi Arabia, through destroying Syria, Libya, creating mass starvation in Yemen, one of the unique crimes of contemporary history. And we have silence in the mainstream media. We have silence in think tanks.
$60 billion.
Go ahead, Ken, jump in.
$60 billion weapons to Saudi Arabia, the most grotesque nation on the planet. Women have zero rights. Again, I say, how is it possible that the United States can talk about its concern for women and selling $60 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, in which women aren't even considered humans, quite frankly? They're not allowed to go out alone. They can't drive. They don't vote.
The Saudis have been elected to the UN Commission for Women's Rights. Just like they were elected early on.
That's probably the most Orwellian ending of Crosstalk of all time. We've run out of time, gentlemen. Many thanks to my guests in New York, London, and here in Moscow.